guest, Wohali Casimier. Welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Good to be on. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay. Well, now I think it's pretty interesting. I think the viewers really have some questions. And I think the main questions they have about your homeschooling experience is, what was your social life like? So in other words, how did you make friends being homeschooled? And did you miss prom and things like that? Tell us about your social life first.
Okay. So first of all, whenever I'm asked about homeschooling, that's always, I would say, top 1 to 3 questions that I'm asked. It's always about, did you, how did you make friends, or, how's your social life? One question or another related to that. So yeah, so in my experience, there were 2. So one primary one was I was brought up in a Christian home. There was, of course, the church family that I would grow up with. So that would be pretty small for the most time, for the most part when I was younger, but that was part of it. And then also I was involved in me and my brothers. I'm the middle brother of 3. We had different programs that we were in. We were involved in sports. For myself, I didn't spend a lot of time on that. I did gymnastics and a couple months of track. But yeah, basically different programs with the park district, and just being around a lot of other homeschoolers as well. Study groups, just finding time to go to museums, hang out, play dates.
Right, when you were younger, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And in events, just you learn that you have to, especially when you're a teenager, you learn to, what I would learn to do is just take things into my own hands. I'm in control of a lot of the social interactions I have. If I don't want to do something, I could be antisocial if I wanted to, so that wouldn't be healthy. But my point is, it would be up to me to decide, hey, I want to get involved in this. I like these friends here. We have this in common, so I would like to spend more time with them. Mom, can we, how can we make this happen? Yeah.
So it's very organic. So it sounds like it's different because, see, I went to public school. And while you do have some level of control picking your friends, you are thrust into a big group of people, and you don't have a lot of control over whether or not you want to interact with them, in other words. So if you're all in the same classroom together, or you're all on the playground at recess, then these people can enter your space, even if you don't want them to. And that's when you start learning about boundaries and all that. But it's almost like, let me ask you this. Would you say that, looking back, now that you are an adult, would you say that making friends is almost like when you're an adult, you kind of choose who you want to spend time with? In other words, it's like you can really, if you're gelling, you can say yes or no. It's more about who you want in your personal space. Has that been your primary experience? I mean, do you feel like you're missing out because
it's on a whole another level when you're an adult. So to keep it 100 with you, there were times where, and as the homeschooling journey, it's an experience. It's a journey. And when there were certain times, just keeping 100, there were certain times that, especially when I was pulled from private school and around the second half of third grade, I had to get used to, you know what, I miss my friends. And not that I wouldn't see them at all, but just much less often. So that's the point where I'd have to learn, I got to bug mom sometimes and just, this is important to me. And we worked it out. But initially, it was difficult. And so, more so in my adult life, I would say at the age of 19, there was a certain point where I felt lonely. And it was about a year after I finished high school. I was working, and it was around the time I had left the I had left the church that my family was going to. And that was the primary source of social interaction in my life. I'll be involved in other things, but that's every single week.
Okay. So consistent.
Right.
Social interaction with church family. Okay.
Right. So that was pretty significant. And so, I really felt it. And what I learned from that is just the lesson of, more so as an adult, no one's going to do this for you. You have to decide the people you want to be around and who are healthy. What's the healthy? Because there's places you can come if you want, but are these people having the same mindset as you? Are they going somewhere in their life or trying to achieve something, or are you just trying to find some place where you fit in and you're because there are plenty of places where you would be invited to, but they may not be healthy. So Pierre, Wohali, it is up to you to decide that and to be consistent with getting the social interaction that you need and making that happen yourself. Yes.
Do you think being homeschooled prepared you for that? Like prepared your mindset for being, I would describe what you just told me as being an independent thinker. So that's why I'm going to call it. Do you think being homeschooled prepared you or taught you how to be an independent thinker?
I would say yes. And through the means of I could say this of both parents, but primarily of my dad. My dad was the most influential person in my life as far as helping me to learn how to reason and evaluate what people are telling me and to test for truth and come to my own conclusion. His name is Wohali Pierre Casimier, and I miss him a lot. He passed last year in March. But it's because of him. And that's part of homeschooling. Mom and dad, they're the most important part. In my experience, they were the most important part of that experience. So yes, because of them, I do feel that I was prepared for that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's just make sure the viewers know when you started homeschooling. So I think I heard something about the second half of third grade. And so you were homeschooled all the way through until the 12th grade level. Is that correct?
Yeah, but there's a little more. You should know. I'll give you a quick timeline.
Okay.
So we started, like I said, I'm the middle brother of the three sons that my mother and father had. And I recall in kindergarten and kindergarten, preschool, before first grade, we were all homeschooled.
Okay.
And once I came to first grade, I did first through third grade in a private school with other families. And then in the middle half of the third grade, before I finished third grade, we started coming back to homeschooling. all the way up to, and I stayed homeschooled myself all the way up till the end of high school.
Okay. 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 So now well, let me ask you this. Why did your parents decide to if you were going to a private school, which most people they feel like that's a very good decision because you're paying, you're going to get top-notch education for your children. Why did your parents decide to homeschool you when they were already had you attending a private school?
Mm-hmm. So at that point, the main thing was because of the expense. It cost a lot. And my mom was already a substitute teacher. She already had everything that she needed to teach us, basically. And yeah, just it got to a point where it was difficult financially. That's the main reason why we went back to homeschooling. And yeah, that's the main reason.
Well, so why not just put you in a public school? Did your parents ever just say, because that would have been free? I mean, do you know why they didn't opt for that? Or like you said, is it because your mom was like, well, I can do it. I'm already a substitute teacher. I feel pretty good. You think that was her reason? Because public school was an option, right? I mean, or was it not?
No.
Okay. Why not?
Tell you why. So to answer that, I'm going to go back to before that time, the first time we were homeschooled.
Yeah.
So with that, the reason why my parents decided to do that is, number one, to be in control and take, basically not give us to people who don't share our same values, or who share our same values, have our same goals in mind as a family. And we had a Christian household.
Okay.
So being Christian, their foundation was that, okay, our children are gifts from God.
Yes.
And we need to take that seriously. And we're going to do the best that we can. And public school is not the best that we can in terms of teaching them to be, number one, have good character. And number two, their foundations, their values.
Yes.
And yeah, being in control of what basically how we learn to think. So that was very important to them. So to answer, to go back to your question, did that kind of answer your question? Or?
Yes, it did. That was, wow. Your parents, like, they knew they had a plan, and some parents, the plan is public school. And because, that's just been how people have done it in the family. So I understand that. I went to public school. I think your parents had a lot of fortitude and foresight into what they wanted to do. I think that's awesome. So let me ask you this. So you said you went to the private school up to the 3rd grade now, and you had friends. Do you still know the friends you had from private school?
I know a few of them. Yeah, a few of them were, a good portion of them actually we're still in contact with.
Is that because they went to church? Were they part of your church family too? Is that why?
None of them were.
Okay.
But it was a Christian private school, so structure, values, all that. So, but yeah, only a couple of them, a handful of them I would say, we're more than just staying in contact. We're actually, still good friends to this day. So just a handful.
Okay. Because the reason why I asked that is because do you notice any difference? I mean, now there could be some differences, like in as far as family structure, like maybe, some of your friends didn't have both parents, but let's just say the friends you're speaking of, did they have both parents? Were they still raised by both parents in the home, the ones you have? Because I'm wondering if there's a difference in how they came out, because they were still enrolled in a private school, but it's still like a public school in the sense that it's a bunch of people that you're exposed to, just a bunch of different personalities, and it's not one-on-one. Okay. Do you feel like they had a different experience than you? Are they different in some way? Did they have prom? Do you feel like you missed out on anything?
Okay. So first, I would say that one thing you want to note is that the ones who I still not only am in contact with, but still like we're still cool, we're still good friends to this day. Mm-hmm. They eventually came to homeschooling too. And we were, and I would say just off the top of my head, at least several, or a couple more who I still, still good friends with today. We did high school together in a study group called Class Conversations. So, that's part of the story. And the second part.
Tell us the story. What's the story? I mean, because why?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Tell us the story, because I want to know why. How did? So some of these other children, they got to high school as far as the private side, got to the high school level, and then they started homeschooling with you, like in a study group. Do you know why that happened? What happened? Why did the parents all of a sudden?
Okay. So I can say that one of our family friends, they're the Richardson family. They really got started in a program called Classical Conversations, and they got other homeschoolers together to do this program with them, built a community, and so they were a family that we went to the same private school together. And so there were a couple of the other families, a couple of my other classmates and their parents came to Classical Conversations, and through the Richardsons starting that, they said, oh yeah, the Casimiers are doing it. The, Richardsons, us, were doing it. And it just came together. Oh, this makes sense. And this is great. And we're having a good experience. So y'all should come over too.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Now, what were some of since your mother was a substitute teacher, what was her teaching style? Meaning, was it very rigid? Did you get taught traditional subjects, or did she say, look, what do you want to learn? And what do you feel like your purpose is? How did she approach? Because, a lot of women or even fathers want to know this too. Was it structured? Because a lot of people feel like they should bring public school home. And so I want you to expound more upon your experience, what it was like being a homeschool student and having your mother teach you as opposed to this private school teacher or teachers.
I love that question. Okay. So I'll start by saying, I'll start by saying I had going back to the private school, I had certain moments where some of the teachers that I had, there was a little friction or a conflict at certain moments, but overall, for the most part, no major issues with them. And they were, for the most part, they were excellent, and we had a good experience in the private school, but my mother is better, and I'll tell you why. So with my mother, she from the third grade to when I started high school, she was really, or even until I want to say eighth grade.
Mm-hmm.
From that time period, she was more involved in our schooling. She needed to teach us some things directly and monitor us more closely. But I would say, in my experience, in around eighth grade or so, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, mainly eighth grade, that's when she didn't have to do as much, because in eighth grade, I did a program. It was technically homeschooling, but it has a certain term, maybe charter school. It's a program called K-12. And
I've heard of that. I've heard of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't a good fit for me, but I gained some valuable experiences from that.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time, she barely did, as far as the direct schoolwork, she kind of backed off. I was independent at that point, and she had to do a lot, you know. And same in high school. I need to ride to the once a week. Once a week, we would meet in a study group.
Okay.
And I need to ride there. And so she would drop us off and go do her thing. Or sometimes she would stay and talk with the other parents and hang with them. But yeah, it was more hands off at that point. But yeah, to answer your question, it was better with her, because my experience was better than any other other teachers, because of course, who can care for you like your mom, who can give you the attention that you need, and that, especially with having more students, that's less attention that you can have. The private school, it wasn't a huge class, but still, even on a smaller level, if you have 10 kids compared to 3 kids, you're going to be able to give more attention to the 3 kids. One thing I always love to talk about is how my mom encouraged me when I would have difficulty learning certain things. Mm-hmm. And some things I would learn more. They would take longer for me to understand. But in other subjects, I could understand very quickly. So when I would get discouraged, she would encourage me and affirm me. You know, you're smart. You're going to do beautiful things, and that's all. That always sticks with me. And even in first grade, when I was having difficulty learning to read, yeah, I have my teachers, but as far as who's spending a lot of time and focusing directly on me and reminding me that I am very smart, and despite what a certain adult, I don't think this was on purpose, but a certain adult at the school made me feel like I was dumb. I remember that feeling. And because I was having difficulty learning how to read. And I don't think it was intentional, but that I remember that happening, and I remember how I felt. And my mom encouraged me that, yes, you're smart, you're going to get it. And part of it was finding a book that I was interested in. And she's like, it was The Phantom Tollbooth. And she was like, and she was just watching me, and she was hearing me read, and all of a sudden, and oh wow, look what he's doing. Yeah. So that really, I might not even want to use the word surprise, but it was just like, oh wow, just it wasn't long after that happened that, oh, don't you see, you got it. You know how to read.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is when I first started on this journey. I would socialize on Twitter with some of these other teachers that were actually in schools, and some of the teachers would be frustrated and, you know, have some things to say about the children and blame things on the children, and they'll remain nameless. But I remember talking to this one teacher and just saying, you know, look, as a teacher, and just basically as an individual, as a female, it's imperative that we find ways to decompress and de-stress, or else you'll take things out on others because you're too stressed out or you're worn thin. So that could have been what was going on. Because you'd want to think that these people are not intentionally being mean to little children, and people are unconscious. They don't realize that if you have a level of impatience, then you could harm a child with your words.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of, it could turn into verbal abuse if you don't sit back and say, okay, let me breathe. I think I'm a little stressed out. But the way the system is set up, it doesn't allow for these things. So it's really sad.
Can I hop on that for a moment?
Yes.
Stress and learning. And one reason why I appreciate, one of the main things I appreciate about my homeschooling experience is the fact that I remember, and when I remember the factor of stress is very important to talk about, because when you're dealing with your parents, in a healthy way, you can feel less stressed. You can feel more comfortable, because you can feel more comfortable, and you can learn it. You can learn at your own pace, but it's more difficult to learn when you're feeling stressed. And I felt stressed sometimes outside of my homeschooling experience. I've felt stressed sometimes because of certain deadlines with certain things. And of course that can be important. You got to learn to push yourself and different things. That's not always bad, but that was very meaningful to me, is being able to learn at my own pace and to not feel stressed all the time.
Okay, Wohali. So I'm really glad that that you mentioned stress, because one of the things that I've noticed, if I compare my experience at being in a public school, and then how I am with my son and my daughter, and them being homeschooled, they do seem to be less stressed, because you can always just walk away. I mean, it's not like you have to, like, let's just say you're working on, I remember when my son was learning how to do multiplication, when things started getting tense, it's like, because he was like, this is getting kind of difficult. I can't really quite remember, how do you do it? And so we just said, you know what, let's go and play for a little while. You know, let's do Legos. I'll take you outside. And then I had to think about my approach on how I was going to do it. And so after I had a minute to calm down and think, I said, you know what? Music works. And so I just said, let me bust out this Schoolhouse Rock. And when I played that, when I played that for him, because I learned with Schoolhouse Rock, it sticks in your head. And when I had a math test, I was like, you know, I could remember the song, and then I knew the song. So when we would go over things, he could remember. So it's easy. So that's the fun thing about homeschooling. And I'm sure your mom had lots of different approaches and ways. You can get really creative, because it's just your children, and you know what they'll respond to. So let me ask you some questions. What types of subjects? Because I'm wondering, first of all, please tell the viewers what state you're in.
Okay. I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that is because I wanted to know, there's a couple of things. One of the things I want to know is, what types of regulations or, red tape did your parents have to go through just to pull you from a private school? And then was there some type of oversight that, during your process, your homeschooling process?
As far as I can remember, I don't believe there was, but I remember there was something I want to say when I was in high school, there was some, which was between 2012, 2015, there was something significant that changed with the laws. It may not be about pulling children out of school and homeschooling them, but there was some kind of homeschooling law that was significant that changed at that time. Maybe having to do with like college credits, college transfer, something along that line. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, about that. I'm so glad you mentioned that. So since you were homeschooled, what about like a diploma? Did you get a diploma? Did your mom issue a diploma? How did that work?
Yeah, so I have a high school diploma, and my mom puts that together with the collaborative effort of the community, and probably, you know, you just gotta be around the right people, be around the people who know what you don't know, and it will work out. So yeah, so I do have a high school diploma, and I can't remember all the details of how that was put together, but she had some help with that.
Okay. And so now that you are 25 and you were issued a homeschooling diploma, it doesn't have like ABC institution high school on it. So how is that working for you? Like, are you in the job market? Do you have to explain that? Or are you just saying, look, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. How is all this working out now? As far as it relates to the high school diploma, do you have to use it? Do you have to present it anywhere? People ask you about that? Okay.
So I hadn't had any problems myself with that.
Okay.
There was at least one or two situations, and when I was considering college courses, there were no major issues, but it got a little technical with when they were looking over the diploma, but no major issues. I haven't had any major issues. But then again, to be honest, it's like I didn't really want to go to college. That's not where. And again, it could happen later on in my life, but right now, that's not been my focus. And coming out of high school, I was like, I want to work. I want to make some money. So, yeah. And quick side note on that, if I may. One thing I just want to mention this briefly. I appreciate learning and being homeschooled. I got to learn more about economics, like just on a practical level, talking to mom and dad about their bills and learning how the real world works. And yeah, just stuff like that. My point is that you can learn some things that often you may not really learn as much about that are just like practical, like, come on, like learn bills, mortgage, how does this work with credit and things of that practical finance. So not to get on a side tangent, but I just wanted to mention that. So yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, because are you in the job market, or how did that work when it came to jobs? Like, did you intern anywhere? Did anybody ask you, oh, where'd you go to school? Did that come up once you became an adult and you just say, I want to work here, maybe I want to intern there? Because I know when I went into the job market and I was fresh, because I didn't have any work experience. When you first come out, you don't have work experience. So you have to say, well, I interned here. I went to high school here. I got a diploma. And, so they ask you when you're really young, like 18, 19, what did you do? What have you been doing? Did you volunteer? So tell me what kind of experience that was like for you, just being homeschooled. Did it come up? Was it an issue?
Okay. So no major issues, but you have to see with the jobs that I've had since I've been out of high school, none of them have required any kind of education. So that is one thing to consider. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask for that. But one note on that is, you know, you see the job market is changing, and often degrees are not considered as important as they were in previous decades. So that's something to consider as well. So I haven't personally had any issues as I've been trying to pursue certain jobs. I haven't had an issue with that.
So remember how we were talking about your friends from private school? Did any of your previous friends that ended up staying all the way through to the 12th grade, did any of them attend a prom? Or do you have friends or cousins who attended a prom and they're like, well, Holly, you missed out. You missed out, man. You know? Any of that going on? What's up with that?
Okay, so first off, for me, I went to homecoming and I went to prom. Okay,
tell us about that.
So, all right, so I went actually so for the homecoming. This was not associated with classical conversations, the study group that I did. But for high school, but this was for my friend's homecoming at her high school, which was, if I remember right, it was a public school. Yeah, if I remember right, it was either a public or it wasn't homeschool. So I did get that experience, and I had a wonderful time with my friend. And so that's homecoming. And then for prom, yes, we did prom as well. And that was a wonderful.
The same girl? The same girl?
Actually, this is a different girl.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
Yeah. yeah. So yeah, that was cool. And I still have it on my Facebook somewhere. You look back through the years, it's still there. So pictures.
How did you meet this? Okay, so if this girl went to public school, how did you meet her? Was this through like some play dates and y'all just remembered each other? You know, when you got older, where'd you meet this girl?
Okay, so she was
girls, females.
Okay. So let's start with the first friend from homecoming. She was part. We've seen each other since we were babies, little babies. Our families were already, family friends, and so so she was part of the church my family was going to.
Okay.
So it was that was with her high school that she was part of. So that's how we already were cool and everything. Okay. So but then with my friend, the friend that I went to prom with,
right?
She was doing the same program, the classical conversations program that I was in. And yes, homeschoolers actually get together and we have proms, our own proms. So don't forget.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you can just work. Okay. So all the parents got together and organized it so you guys could do that. That's awesome.
Not even our, it was like there were dozens and dozens of homeschoolers at this prom. It wasn't just our study group.
Yeah.
It was all sorts of homeschoolers. I can't remember the organization that put it together, but yeah, it was more of a large scale thing. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. And this is something new I've heard of, because I thought maybe you got invited to a friend's prom that was enrolled like in a public school or a private school somewhere. So this is how I was thinking, like you got in.
Okay.
I'm thinking,
and if I remember right, that may have happened with my older brother.
Okay.
Because my older brother, if I'm remembering right, he did go to his friend's prom. His girlfriend at the time their prom, and that was with a public school, or that was not a homeschool type deal. So yeah, you can do that too. You can make your own, or you could go to someone else's. So yeah, you don't have to miss out on that.
Okay, so there were three of y'all, and how did your mom handle that? So, for instance, because that's 3 separate grade levels. Like, what are the ages? So, what is the age difference between you and your brothers? What are we talking here?
Okay, so we're each about 2 years apart, roughly. So that's not a huge gap.
So so how did your mom handle that? Because I know a lot of women would wonder how you would handle multiples with a homeschooling experience. So did your mom kind of just teach you guys all the same thing? Look, we're all going to learn. Because you're 2 years behind and you're 4 years behind. So you're going to eventually learn this anyway. So we're working on division today, all y'all. I mean, was it stuff like that? Or was she just, okay, this is for you. This book is for you, honey. And this over here this is for you. So how did she do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we, for the most part, I got we were each, this 3rd grade work is for you.
Okay.
This 5th grade work is for you. This 7th grade work is for you.
Okay.
That's for the most part how it worked. But there was a time where me and my younger brother, we were actually doing pretty much the same work. It was right before high school, or it was either right before high school or the first year of high school. He did the classical conversations the first year that I became part of that. He was doing actually the same class as me. And so that worked out well, but for the most part, it was separated. Yeah, it was separated. And yeah.
And do you feel like you missed anything by being homeschooled? Like when you just look out in the world and you interact with other people on a daily basis, do you feel like you missed out on anything? Do you feel like you didn't? Tell me about that.
Okay. So, I mean, just thinking about that question objectively, I would think so, in one way or another. But I can say, okay. So as far as some on the social side, there were some times that I would feel socially awkward. Mm-hmm. There were certain times where I felt like I was missing out on some things. Mm-hmm. And but you have to consider, was that on account of being homeschooled or on account of my parents' values and their understanding of the world and how they're trying to raise us to be the best that we can be. So
I see.
Yeah. So so in some situations, it may have not been on account of homeschooling. And honestly, yeah, sometimes maybe, yeah, I would think so. I think there all of our, I'm confident that there will be at least, if I could see a movie of my whole homeschooling life, yeah, there will be some instances of, I missed out on that, or I wish I could be a part of that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. That's my experience. Mm-hmm. But when I have children and, hopefully finding the right special lady who will be into that and who would value, taking our children's education into our own hands. It doesn't have to be that way. And it can be the reality can be better for the next generation, even better than my experience. And that's the hope of all parents, I would think, when they're in the right mindset and when they're honest, they would, I would think all parents for the most part, you would want your children to have a better experience than you have. So, yeah, that it doesn't have to be that way, and it's up to you to work out the social interactions for your experience.
What advice would you give to parents who are considering homeschooling their children? Because you said you would do things just a tad bit differently. You know, maybe try to provide a few more experiences that you didn't have. So what kind of advice would you give?
Okay. So number one, get to know your own children. What are their personal interests? Yeah, you have these things that you want for them. And of course, they could be great things, but get to know your children. What are you interested in learning? And and as a parent, how can I best bring that out? You want to be a gymnast, you want to be athletic swimmer. It could be, sports, or it could be art. And yeah, how can I bring out the best based on who you are individually as a person? And I would say my parents did a pretty good job with that. Yeah, but learning your own children, and so in talking about the social interaction aspect, let me get my children with other children like them who are working on something and are trying to improve themselves. They're developing a skill or a talent that's specific to them and their personality, who they are. And that also, that will help with a lot of things, just with the social interactions. And yeah, and number two, be around, this kind of goes without saying almost, but be around other parents with your same values and who you know well, or even if you don't, we're meeting new people all the time, but do you understand this other family's values and how, and do you want your kids around? Do you want your kids around that? Are you comfortable with that? With this family, spending the night over people's house, which can be one. I have some great memories from sleepovers and different things like that. Days like, naturally kids, they want to spend a lot of time. I want to spend, we got to go already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like trips, sleepovers, things like that, where you can spend a lot of time, where they can spend a lot of time with their friends. And yeah, so my point is, with just people who have the same values as you and who are, have the same, that you feel comfortable around and comfortable for your children to be around. So I would say that as well. That's just right off the top of my head of some advice that I would give. So.
Yeah, that's all very good advice, because, again, what I've found being a homeschooling mother, that I'm very picky, and I always have been, about who I want to be around my children. I'm very picky about that. And so that's why the circle is very small. And so in order to supplement that, we have to do lots of family outings and family things. Let's go here, let's go there. I think that's this is where it gets really tricky. And I want you to speak to this, because you're an adult now, but as a child, you process these things and your perception is different. But for me, being a mother, it's, how you said, I kind of wanted, I wish I would have had a few more social interactions or just a few more things. and this is what I want to share with the viewers, because it's like when your children are like, when they're developing, that's why you don't put them in public school, because you're like, you know what? I don't want them to be exposed to some extra mess that I don't agree with. That's not my value system. So you know what? Nope, we're not going to go to that person's party. Nope, we're not going to go, see this movie. No, we're not going to. And so that's why it's, you have to weigh it out. And so, like I said, I try to do the best I can to say, okay, well, you know what? Let's do more family stuff. Let's go here and have this quality time experience with the family, where the family is bonding and the family is strengthened, because you'll remember this. You will remember this and you'll take it with you. And then as you become older, you'll have good discernment when you're choosing. It's like you'll have radar, right? You'll know who to pick out and who to spend time with. Isn't that isn't that an important skill to have? Because remember how you were just saying earlier in the interview about just being an independent thinker and picking out certain people, like, because you have a value system. It's important. You need people to support you in who you are. Who are you right now? And if you're going to come over here and you're going to be negative, or you have something, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like your value is wrong. So you get radar. Develop radar. I think. I don't know. What's your?
Yeah, I totally hear you on that, and so that's such an important thing to learn. Is learning. You can't hang with everyone. To be honest, you treat everyone with respect. Treat everyone kindly, but you have to learn to excuse yourself sometimes.
Real talk.
And it's like a balance of at the same on the one hand, there are certain social circles or social interactions you may want to avoid, but at the same time, you learn the most from people who disagree with you, who have different mindset, and you learn to ask questions.
Yeah.
And you learn if you have a disagreement. And this is one reason why I love the classical method of teaching. One thing I appreciated about it is it's a lot of questions. It's built on learning to reason, learning to where we see things different, learning where the common ground is, and rather than talking, learn to ask questions and persuade by learning to listen, most importantly. So so what I'm trying to put together is the fact that, there's certain things you want to avoid, certain situations where you may want to avoid certain social circles, but at the same time, you learn a lot from people who disagree with you, people who see things differently than the way that you see them. And so you have to learn how to talk to people who have different life experiences than you, have different values than you, different worldview than you. So you have to learn to balance those two things. And that's something that I've taken. I've had, that's a foundation that was instilled in me from, especially like I would say as a teenager, because when you're younger, that's something more you learn in my experience, as you get older, like especially in the teen years, you learn how to, another thing you learn is not simply what to believe, what to think, but learn the why behind. So why do I think this? Why do you think this? What is that based on? And let's ask some questions to see if my perspective holds up. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I need to, maybe I have something in my perspective that isn't right. Cool. But yeah, that's one of the most, that's the most important thing. And just in summary, like with homeschooling, you learn to, you have more of an opportunity to learn how to think and not just what to think, and learning a bunch of information that could be helpful later on. But to be honest, you knew it in high school. We're not going to learn a lot of the stuff we're learning. You're correct. You're correct, 15-year-old Pierre. Pierre is my birth name. You're correct. You're not going to use this. You know that. But that's the most valuable thing, I would say, is learning how to think, learning to ask the why, and learning to evaluate perspectives.
Okay. And, you know, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, do you think maybe you were, well, I guess you said, you know, you do come from a Christian background. Do you feel like there were things, you know, like when you go to public school, I think children learn a lot of things at a young age that they probably would have necessarily not learned or been exposed to. Like, I didn't know when I went to public school, I thought everybody's parents were married like mine. I didn't know. I didn't even know what a single mother was. That's how. And so I started knowing, and so I started going to other people's homes and stuff. Your parents aren't married? Like, where's your dad at? Oh, they're not. My parents are divorced. Really? You just think everybody's life is like yours that's how you think as a child. I didn't, yeah. There was just certain things I just didn't know. Like, you have people who have been, children who have been touched. You're exposed to that. I didn't know that until but I was in public school. Then I started learning that. You know, the first time I learned about, I was 14 years old, and I went over a sleepover to this a neighbor's house. Right, this girl and her parents came in, and she was like, she just threw down some condoms. She gave us some condoms. Oh, okay, I'm 14 at the time, right? And I'm like, what's this? I had no idea what that was. I was like, what's this? She's like, you know what this is? I was like, I was like, what's this, some candy? This is like in a little shiny wrapper. I was like, what is this? And she's like, you know what this is? And I was like, no, what is this? She's like, it's a condom. I was like, what do you do with this? And then, you know, what do you do with this? Anyhow, my point, and then she explained to me, I was like, ooh, I don't need this. I was like, oh, I don't need that. You take it. You know, I don't need that. And I'm like 14. I'm like, eh. So, but my point in saying that is like, you know, do you think, I guess there's just certain, is that like your experience? Like, do you have stories of like other people who aren't homeschooled that maybe know things, and they're telling you like, well, don't you know X, Y, Z, A, B, C? Because I mean, my parents were Christian too, you know, so, and we weren't talking about all that, you know, I didn't know nothing about that.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely. So first off, I will share a little bit for a moment about my younger brother's experience, because in high school, our parents gave us a choice. Okay. We could continue to stay homeschooled if we felt that it was best for us, or there were other options that they gave us, like certain public schools. There was a college prep not far from us. It's now known as Hansberry College Prep. That's where my younger brother went to school in high school. And so that's the choice that he made. And, you know, at that point, he's a teenager, and our parents gave us a lot of different great values and different things, of a solid foundation, you could say. Yes. As far as, so there's that. But at the same time, it was, I think, I could say that he shared what the family, you know, he would come back with stories of different things that would happen. So especially in the first year that he was there, I remember it was, in many ways, it was kind of like a culture shock, or just like different, you know, being around different people and different things happening that may have not been, he was not as used to. Like, oh yeah, there are single mothers in this world. There are children, there are teenagers going to the school with me who are baby mamas, baby daddies. Of course, that happens, but like to actually see that and experience that and to talk to people and evaluate their mindset often, which is toxic or not healthy. And, you know, that was very much an experience for him. But at the same time, I would say, as far as what I observe about him, I speak well of him. I appreciate the fact that I appreciate the way he handled himself in many of the pretty, I'll call them pretty out there situations. They were out there. And yeah, I would just want to say he handled himself very well, but he could have not handled himself very well, and he could have had different other experiences. So at that point, I would say I think it was cool that, you know, he had the decision to go to public school just as an option. As you're a young man now, at this point, we feel comfortable. You can decide what you want to do. And so he had a good foundation at that point, but like throw in younger kids, and we're living in 2022. It's like, I don't want, just certain children, certain groups of children may not be healthy for either same age as your children, but they may not be healthy for your children in developing their character and growing them to their full potential. So that's my take. That's my take on it. But so at least I would say at least like later on that may make sense, you know, to give a choice of, you know, public school, private school, but at least have a foundation in place and teach your children to have good values and to stand up for what they believe, and not change up when my mom and dad aren't here and that kind of thing. So yeah, so shout out to my brother for that. And of course, life takes us different places. We have different perspectives at different point in our lives. But I would just say, with his understanding of his worldview and the values that were instilled in him, just what I respect is just the fact that to the person he stood up for what he believed in, and he's yes. That's how I would answer that.
Okay. No problem at all with that. Thank you so much for that. I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all of this valuable insight with us today. It was such a pleasure having you. And I hope that you come back and share.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And share some of the other things that you're doing in life. It was a pleasure. And
likewise,
you guys really enjoyed this show, and we'll see you next time on Bringing It Home with C.N.Smith.